Artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation are changing the world where we live, work, and play. Jobs of today won't be the jobs of tomorrow. Children need to be prepared to thrive in this new reality. At 21st Cent Ed, we provide 21st century skills and talent development that future-proofs our children for the impact of emerging technologies through comprehensive STEM experiences early, often, and everywhere. New technologies are disrupting our society. Let's help get students ready together.
We welcome the opportunity to do real estate work for you. That's what we are. If you've crossed paths with us before, you'll know that we're a professional services company focusing solely on real estate. I love the real estate business. I don't know if you're working out of your garage, if you're working out of your basement, or if you're looking for 1 million square feet. All of it starts with real estate. And that's why CBRE likes the work that it does and likes partnering with Silicon Slopes. Just a quick plug. If you're an office type of person, I left our market view on the back table, and you can take a look at it, and it says vacancy shows signs of leveling off. That's a good message if you're in the office industry. If you're a big real estate investor, I left our industrial market view on the back that tells you that record construction, record low vacancy says it's a great time to look at industrial. That's the kind of work that we do. We welcome the opportunity both to partner with you on any real estate needs that you have, and again, appreciate the partnership with Silicon Slopes. Hope you enjoy the session today.
Welcome to Silicon Slopes Live. I'm here with Joseph Woodbury, who's the founder and CEO of Neighbor. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I was excited to, when we booked you, and because we were on a podcast about 3 years ago, and with your marketing and business model, a lot of people are familiar with the Neighbor story. But for those that aren't, what is Neighbor? What do you guys do?
So we take unused space and we rent it out for storage. So that could be a space in a home, like a garage or a basement or an RV pad or something like that. Or it could be a space in a commercial building. We work with large REITs and office buildings and industrial warehouses, and then we rent it out for storage to people in the community. So it's fairly similar to like an Airbnb concept where they're renting out space for you to come stay for a night. We rent it out for storage.
Yeah. I was up at a buddy's house in Midway, and there was a big fancy horse trailer and 5 boats parked on his lot. And that's like pretty good money for him because he does use Neighbor.
Oh yeah, some of those people that rent multiple spaces out, we'll talk to them. And they're like, yeah, I make 50, 60 grand every single year just on Neighbor.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, so where did the idea come from? It spawned from college campus, right?
Yeah, so my co-founder Preston, our idea came about, I think, the way all good ideas come about. And that was from having the pain itself. The summer before our senior year, one of his clients, he ran this videography firm, and one of his clients was down in South America, so he had to leave and go down to South America. And of course, him and his wife needed a storage unit while they were going to be out of the country for 4 months. He looked into getting a unit and kind of had the same experience everyone has when they look into getting a storage unit, and that is the closest facility to him with any sort of vacancy was going to be like a half-hour drive to the next town over, and he was going to have to pay like $200 or $300 a month, which is a ton of money. The largest subscription payment that most Americans make right now is their storage unit. When you think about, you pay $10 a month for your Netflix, you pay $30 a month for your internet, and you've got people paying $300, $400, $500 a month for these storage units. It's the only thing really comparable is like a mortgage payment. So he was like, there's no way I'm going to do this. And he ended up finding a friend that let him store in his garage. And when he came back and went to pick his items up, he just had the thought, well, this was such a better experience. Like, I felt so much more peace of mind knowing my items were in a nice, clean garage in a neighborhood I trusted than in one of those, dirty, dingy industrial storage units. And I saved a lot of money. Why doesn't everyone do this? There's got to be an empty garage in every neighborhood in the country. What if there was some sort of directory or marketplace where you could see the vacant garages nearby. None of us, there's 3 co-founders, myself, Preston, and a third, Colton. I don't think any of us had intended on starting a company. All 3 of us had lined jobs up. That same summer, I had just got done working for Bain & Company, accepted a full-time offer with them. Preston had just accepted a full-time offer. But our senior year, we started working on it, and it started getting a little growth, and we started competing in some local business competitions at BYU and the U, and we decided to do it. So we all called our jobs our last semester and said, hey, we're not going to show up, and here we are today.
I love it. Very good story. And so the sharing economy, like, people are very familiar with that, but you guys have learned and seen it firsthand. How has it evolved, and how is it evolving?
Yeah, so the sharing economy, I think everyone's familiar with it at this point. You know, if you'd asked this question 10 years ago, people were maybe not so familiar with it. Airbnb was just getting started, Uber was just getting started. But now, if you look at the top 20 internet companies in the world, 100% of them are marketplaces. You've got search marketplace like Google, you've got an e-commerce marketplace like Amazon, Netflix is a content marketplace where they bring content creators and content viewers together on their platform. Airbnb is a hospitality marketplace, Uber's a transportation marketplace, Instacart's a grocery delivery marketplace. The most valuable venture-backed companies today are marketplaces, and that's fundamentally shifted the venture industry. It's raised the amount of capital that's gone into venture. It's raised the type of valuations you can seek. These aren't just traditional SaaS companies that are going to get built and have $1, $2, $3 billion valuations anymore. That change is only recently arriving in Utah. So Utah necessarily, I think, is lags somewhat behind the Bay Area. We've really successfully, we've put ourselves on the map, I think, as one of the most successful SaaS technology states in the country, if not the most per capita, right? I think of Utah as having almost 3 phases of technology. You've got kind of this early phase of Novell WordPerfect, and then you've got the last 15, 20 years of becoming a SaaS powerhouse. I think we're just starting to enter that 3rd phase where we're starting to build fintech companies out of Utah, and we're starting to build marketplaces outside of Utah. These are companies that aren't going to be $2 billion exits. They're going to be 20, 30, $50 billion exits, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, very exciting indeed. So I'm interested in what the impacts of COVID were to your business and business model.
We were super fortunate. We were already growing pretty quickly, and then COVID came along and was like, here's some extra help. If you think about it from a demand perspective, because we have supply and demand on our platform, the demand was affected because every single person in the nation was forced into their home, and they had to clean out space for a home office or for a home gym or something like that, or they were just spending more time in their home, and so they noticed things more and they start organizing, and they need a storage unit. So storage demand, which was already quite high, storage facilities were operating at like 93% occupancy rates nationwide. By the end of last year, they were operating at like 95% occupancy rates, which most real estate industries, our friend from CBRE could tell us, operate at like much, much lower occupancy rates. Like no one's even close to 95% occupancy rates, but that's what the storage operates at. So the demand side saw a lot of tailwinds there. But then interestingly for us, the supply sides also saw some tailwinds. You had a lot of people that were maybe temporarily out of a job with all the companies doing layoffs, and we hadn't rolled out stimulus checks yet or any of that. And people were wondering, how can I make excess money? How can I pay the lease on this place or pay my mortgage? And a lot of the traditional channels for gig economy income were closed off to them. So you couldn't go drive for Uber. Uber was shut down. You couldn't list your home for Airbnb because the travel economy was shut down. People weren't traveling or flying anymore. So people were asking themselves, how do I make money from my home that's generated off of the local economy? It has to be hyper-local. And Neighbor was like the only solution. So we saw a big boost not only to our demand side, but also to our supply side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what happens during a big boost like that, right? From the CEO's perspective, from the CTO's perspective, how did you guys cope?
So it was interesting for us. We had just, when COVID hit, we just raised our Series A from Andreessen Horowitz. And so we were kind of planning on expanding dramatically anyways. And so it was nice in that it coincided right alongside that. One thing it did is it caused us to adjust our plan and accelerate it even further as far as national expansion goes. Early on in Neighbor, after we started expanding outside of Utah, we followed a very Uber-style playbook where we'd launch each individual market, we'd launch each city, we'd have a city launcher in the market, and that worked quite well for us. I remember when our first market outside of the state of Utah was LA, and I remember it was a very exciting day when we realized we got more hosts in the first 7 weeks in LA than we'd gotten in the first year and a half in Utah. So that playbook was working for us, but it's necessarily slower because you have to launch each market one at a time. As the pandemic caused everything to shut down, it became more difficult to launch markets with a market launcher. We started shifting more and more to just a headquarter-centric strategy, much closer to an Airbnb model. And that was very successful for us. Today, that accelerated it so much that today we have active users in every city and every state in the country, which is, I'd say that's another unique thing about our marketplace. There's storage need in every city, whether it's a large metro or you go to a town that doesn't even have a post office. It's so small, and they're likely to have multiple storage facilities in the town. And so we have users in every city nationwide with 5,000 people, and also every city nationwide with 1 million people. Whereas like an Airbnb is a little more destination-based. They're only going to have users in the destination cities. And that includes small cities like Moab, right, which is a destination city, but they're not going to have many hosts in Clinton, Utah, for example, because people don't travel to Clinton, Utah.
Yeah, not usually. So the marketplace is coming together quite beautifully for Neighbor, and it's a big one. So with the fundraising and COVID, you probably needed to hire an important part of a company, which is people and talent.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that during those times?
We hadn't built out our executive team yet. We obviously had to hire out, and I think we tripled our headcount last year, if not more. But we also needed to build out the full executive team, and compound the problem of COVID with the fact that we're a marketplace, and so the type of talent we needed often existed outside of the state of Utah. You can find a great, phenomenal VP of sales in the state of Utah because we build some of the best sales teams in the world. Much more difficult, though, to find a phenomenal consumer growth marketing expert, right, that understands how to run a consumer growth team and not a sales cycle. So in recruiting our executive team, we did that. We brought we went out to the Bay Area. We brought our VP of growth in from Mercari, which is a $5 billion buy-sell marketplace based out of San Francisco there, and relocated them to Utah. And I think we just did the tally, and something like 30 plus % of our workforce over the last year we've recruited from outside of Utah. We've recruited just in the last year from New York, from Florida, from Texas, from North Carolina, from Southern California, Northern California, Washington, et cetera. So we'd heard this rhetoric that it's difficult to recruit to Utah from other states, that most of your talent needs to come locally. And we didn't find that to be true at all. People were and some of that could have been caused by the pandemic, but people were very, very excited to move to Utah. In fact, we've often found sometimes it's easier to hire outside of Utah than to hire internally. People aren't scared of the state at all. They love the idea of coming to a state that has 5 national parks where they can afford a home, and build a big, nice home and all of that. So we recruited quite a bit outside of Utah.
Oh, that's interesting. And so how many of those interviews did you do? Like, what's the importance for you of like interacting with all of these hires?
Yeah, so I still interview every single person we hire today, and we run, up until this point, we've run a very hands-on recruiting process where everyone on the team participates, and we think that makes a big difference in recruiting. Our first core value at Neighbor that we talk about all the time is to hire and develop the best, which is nothing special in and of itself. A lot of people say they want to hire and develop the best, but it becomes very difficult to do in a startup because you have positions that you need filled, and it's like, we need this position filled yesterday, and literally the best thing for the business is not to hire and develop the best. The best thing for the business is to get someone in the position that can do the job, and that will actually grow revenue faster than hiring and developing the best. So we've made the conscious decision to make that a core value, and literally hurt the business many times to hire that right person. I remember this was a long time ago, but I think it illustrates this well. We were hiring our first digital marketer, and again, there's not a lot of digital marketers in the state of Utah, much more scarce than in like California, and if they are, most of them, are focused on lead gen for a sales team. So we went out to start interviewing, and we needed this position a month ago. And every day that went by that we didn't have this position filled, we were not able to pursue these channels, and it was really impeding us. And we started interviewing and interviewing and interviewing, and a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by. We still haven't found a candidate who we really feel like we could confidently say is the best. Finally, 6 months later, we've interviewed in person 65 candidates for this position, and we finally found the right person who came with not only a strong digital marketing background, but also a strong statistical analysis background, really focused on optimization of the channels, which we think is important, and we hired them on the spot. We jumped on it. But it can be really hard to be disciplined, and I think it helps the more people on the team you have involved, the more disciplined you can be, because people want to work with great people. And so we're just starting to set up our like official recruiting function. We were very delayed in setting that up because we wanted to create this ownership where each person on the team hires their peers. So we just brought in again, hiring from out of the state of Utah, we brought our VP of people in to come help us stand this up from DoorDash in San Francisco, and building that out right now.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so you mentioned you were doing some fundraising at the beginning of COVID, and then you guys had another Series B in March. So as the CEO, this is an important part of your job, right? And the art and science of it all, I know a lot of folks will be interested. What was the process like for you? Because we were talking a little bit beforehand. The latter was different than the former. But what was your role in this, and what did you enjoy and what did you not enjoy?
I definitely prefer the way we raised our most recent round to our prior rounds. Just briefly, our seed round, we raised from local venture firms. Pelion Ventures and Album Ventures led our seed round. And that was actually a fairly good process because we were competing in these business competitions and getting exposure that way. And we actually had the firms reach out to us, which is always a great position to be in. They reach out, they invited us to come pitch. We came and pitched. We were able to get in a situation where we had multiple term sheets, which is good, especially as like first-time founders where you don't have a ton of leverage in that first seed round process. We at least had something, right? The A round was like the classic, I describe it as like the classic founder grind. I was flying out to San Francisco every other week. I'd be out there for a week. I'd set up these. We tried to run a tight process, right? We didn't want to get into this extended process where you have all these VCs kind of stringing you along, like, hey, maybe we're interested, that sort of thing. So we told everyone, look, we're going to be out here for a month. We're doing all our pitches at once. Everyone's going to get the info at the same time, and then we need to move forward. Even then, week after week go by pitching so many people, you get a lot of interested parties and a lot of people rejected. The Andreessen experience was interesting because many of the VCs we talked to, they would end by asking a question, and that is, who else are you talking to, right? Who else is interested? Do you have any term sheets? And most venture funding, the way it goes is as soon as you get a term sheet, you get 10 term sheets. It's like everyone just kind of circles around waiting for the first term sheet to go down. And when we pitched Andreessen, they never asked that question, which I really appreciated. They never asked the question like, who else is investing? Because the way Andreessen works is they don't care who else is investing. They only invest in the businesses that they fundamentally think are good businesses. It was a 3-day process with them, whereas we'd been working with these others that took a long time. We walked in, we pitched them. I remember I was getting on a flight to head back to Utah after I'd pitched their partner there, and as I'm walking through the boarding line, about to get on the airplane, I get an email from the partner at Andreessen and says, hey, we need 3 GPs to approve this to close the deal. It normally takes us like 3 weeks to schedule, but we can have Mark Andreessen and Andrew Chen and myself in a room tomorrow at 9 a.m. Can you be there? So I walked out of the boarding line. I didn't scan my ticket, walked out of that airport, got an Airbnb, and pitched them the next morning, and we had a term sheet the next day. So that was how the Andreessen process went. Easy at the end, but a really hard process with a lot of no's before then. The fifth wall process, this was our B round, totally different. We were getting a lot of inbound, a lot of venture firms reaching out to us, and we weren't ready to raise. We weren't planning on raising it until later this year, actually. So we were telling everyone that reached out, like, hey, we're heads down, we're working, we're building, we're expanding. No sense in us raising right now when we're growing so quickly. We might as well continue. We have plenty of capital. We might as well continue to spend that to increase our valuation. And we had a couple firms that were especially persistent that wouldn't take no for an answer. Fifth Wall was one of them, and they did a really good job of not only emailing us, but they'd email me and they'd be like, hey, we're flying to Utah to meet with you. Can you will you meet with us in your office? And I'm not going to turn someone down to meet them face to face in the office. I think that's a nice gesture. So we did that a few times. And then they said, hey, can we invest? And we said no. And then they came back and they said, well, we have this portfolio of LPs, these real estate LPs. We work with a lot of these large REITs nationwide. They're all invested in our venture firm. How about we set you up like you're a portfolio company of ours, and we start onboarding these REITs onto your platform for you, and then you can decide if you want us to invest. So they started doing that for us, and a month later, they were like, okay, we've been really successful onboarding customers for you. Can we invest now? And we said no. And then finally, I got a call from them, and they said, we get it. You said no. We're flying out to Utah. We're bringing a term sheet. You can turn down a term sheet if you want to, but we're going to put one on your desk. And that was too much to turn down. So we ended up going with them. They said we'll create a tight close process. So it won't take a month. We can do it in 2 weeks. And so they were able to get that round early, which I think was a really job well done on their part as a VC. I definitely prefer to raise that way. It's a heck of a lot easier than the Series A round where I thought I was going to die after after 3 months of doing that. Yeah.
Well, that's a very fun and cool story. You went in the matter of a couple of years to singing for your supper to saying no several times, and the complete paradigm had been shifted. And that's pretty crafty of them to leverage all they had before. Very interesting. All right, so what happens in your mind, in your brain, like just your genuine, like human emotion, feelings, and your founders after you've raised this money, and there's more responsibility, right? Now you've got people that you have to communicate with.
Yeah, there's definitely more people you have to communicate with. I just mentioned we brought in a VP of people. Our team is growing quite rapidly right now. But there's also, I think people think of raising money as like always a good thing. But technically, I think a good mentality to have is like raising money is the worst thing you could do to your business. Like you are literally selling away part of your business and diluting every single person in the company for capital. So you really need to use that money efficiently. Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, he's talked a lot about how raising a large amount of capital can kill a company as much as other things can kill a company, because when you raise a lot of money, you start to spend a lot of money, and everything from like vendor contracts to everything else starts to become more expensive. You start to experience more of a sense of entitlement. And so how do you maintain that startup culture where you realize that this money isn't just like sitting there waiting to be spent, but it's literally everyone in the company paid for it. It's everyone. That capital is everyone's in the company, and preferably what we do is we never touch that money. We have it, we raise it to deploy it, but like if we can do it more efficiently without touching it, all the better. So like I told you, we didn't plan on raising until later this year. We actually haven't even touched we raised a $50 million B round. We haven't touched it yet, because it's important to have all the pieces in place so that when you deploy that as efficiently as you possibly can. Otherwise, you run into these scenarios where people raise a lot of money and then they just have to go out and raise more times until everyone's diluted and you've burnt a lot of money. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge that comes with raising a lot of money is having the discipline and being able to make those hard decisions of saying no to this or no to that. When it used to be easy to say no because you didn't have the money for it. I remember when we'd come to the office every day and it's like, okay, how many more weeks of money do we have in the bank? Like when are we going to go bankrupt? But then when you're in a different situation, you now have to manage that capital wisely.
Yeah, for sure. So when you were on the podcast about 3 years ago, I asked this question, what are your roles and responsibilities as CEO? And I imagine it's changed quite a bit. What are some of the biggest changes?
Yeah, I think the best way to think, for anyone that is a CEO, I think the best way to think of your role as a CEO, especially early on, is you should do everything so that your head of engineering can focus on engineering and your head of marketing can focus on marketing. And initially, that's kind of the two positions you have, or if you're a SaaS company, maybe you have a head of sales. And so everything else you need to take care of and make sure it gets done, whether that's cleaning the office or doing the legal work or raising money or HR or anything like that. And then what we've tried to do in our company is only shave those roles off of the CEO when there's like an absolute need, because otherwise you start to overhire and so I've kind of managed that role by slowly shaving my role off. We just hired a VP of people, and so I shaved that HR role slightly off. It's still something I'm heavily involved in, but it's not something I'm directing anymore. We're a consumer brand, so that there's always a lot of national news articles that want to talk about us because it's kind of an exciting concept. It's not like a boring business software. So we do a lot of public relations. That was something I managed for a long time, but we just brought in a new comms director to manage that and take that and run with it, so that because we finally reached the stage where it's just untenable to manage all of that with one person. And I think that's the right signal you want. And that, I don't think that just goes for a CEO. I think that goes for really any role. When do you expand? It's when the role that you're currently doing today becomes untenable to manage without another person. And then you hire that person, and you'll never overhire that way. And it certainly hurts to be in a position where you haven't hired quickly enough. I think we're certainly feeling that, where we could have hired faster. But that's always a better position to be in than to have to lay people off because you overhired.
Yeah, for sure. That's very smart. And when things get busy here, this is our busy season, planning summit, come home late or come into the office early. At least in my example, the wife's like, you should hire somebody to do one or two of the things you're doing, because at some point it becomes unpleasant and you might burn out as well, right?
Yeah, if you start a company, you're going to burn out. I think that's comes with the territory.
Yeah. So at what point after the founding and the idea was getting traction did you and your co-founders kind of decide on equity splits and roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, I think it's super important to have a really great founder relationship. Over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of other founders, and it seems like almost all of them, not all of them, but 80% have some sort of major founder dissonance going on. And I can honestly say in the history of Neighbor, we've never had that. I don't know that that's necessarily anything we did, but it's just, it's the type of people my co-founders are. That's part of the reason I wanted to start a company with them. I thought, yeah, this is a cool idea. This is going to be huge. This is amazing. But also, even more important than that, they were just two people that I thought to myself, I could go to Bain & Company or I could start this company. These are the types of people I want to be working with anyway. After I'm done at Bain & Company, why not work with these types of people now? Our path to deciding those roles was fairly easy. It could have been hard, I think, with some ego. I'm not the one that came up with the idea, and yet I'm the CEO, right? So that could have been a difficult conversation. But Preston had a really strong expertise in marketing. He'd run this videography firm. That's how he came to have this idea in the first place. And Colton was just phenomenal with data and kind of the operations piece of the business. And I'd had more experience, on the investor side and with legal. And so we just sat down one day. We didn't operate with roles for the first 6 months, I'd say, or 4 months or something like that. We didn't operate with roles at all. And then one day we kind of sat down and said, all right, what are our roles going to be? And we just did it according to who is best at what. And I think that's what you have to do. If you're not making a decision based on who is going to be the best fit for the role, then you're making a decision based on ego, right? There can't be anything else. If you're putting someone in the role that's not the best fit, then that's an ego-driven decision. And so I think that was a good sign right off from the start. And then I think the founder days early on, there's a ton of differing opinions on this. Some people say, the equity needs to be very different. My opinion is anyone who's going to be considered a founder, you need them to be bought in. Otherwise, they shouldn't be a founder, right? That's a good time to make that decision. If they're not going to be fully bought in, fully, on this, and if you don't think that they deserve a significant amount of equity, then you probably shouldn't be co-founding a company with them. There's probably going to be problems. You should probably just hire them as an employee or something like that. Or maybe not even hiring them as an employee. So that's how we did it. We just said, look, we're all in this together. We didn't do it exactly equal. We gave credit where credit was due for certain things, but like it's fairly evenly split.
You guys are fairly practical and pragmatic in how you approach things. I'm learning. All right, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. I have one more, so get those ready. A lot of growth and a lot of money raised. What are you most excited about for the next 6 to 12 months with the company?
Most people, we don't talk a ton about our long-term vision for the company, and that's because, again, we're like hyper-focused on what we're doing right now, which is building a self-storage marketplace. Self-storage industry is a $500 billion industry by market cap. Most of you probably don't even know the largest company in the state of Utah is not a tech company. It's not Qualtrics. It's not Pluralsight. It's not, Intermountain Healthcare or University of Utah. It's a storage company, Extra Space Storage, publicly traded $25 billion company based out of Cottonwood Heights, Utah. They have less than 3% market share. That's how big this industry is. So we're targeting to build a $60, $70 billion self-storage marketplace here. And that's what we're laser focused on right now. But what we don't talk a ton about is kind of our long-term vision for this company, and it really ties into why we called this company Neighbor to begin with. We called it Neighbor because we believe our biggest asset is not, something stored. We could have called this company Space something or Stash this or Store that or something to do with the items or the space. The reason we called it Neighbor is because we're the first marketplace building a hyper-local marketplace. You have a platform like Airbnb where you go stay in an Airbnb in Thailand and you have this great multicultural experience, but after you're done, you're probably never going to talk to that Airbnb host ever again. You take an Uber in Chicago when you're visiting because you don't have a car. You have this great chat with your Uber driver, but you're probably never going to talk to your Uber driver ever again. On Neighbor, though, you're literally storing with someone in your community, if not a neighbor itself. We've had people write us in and tell us, hey, I've lived next to this neighbor for 5 years, and I've never said more than hi to them on my way to work, because that's kind of how we are today. We don't say hi to our neighbors. We like wave to them and like, please go back in your garage. And then I booked their space on Neighbor, and it forced me to drive my stuff over to their house, and they came out and they like helped me move my boxes into their garage, and we got to talking, and we realized I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican. We don't hate each other, and it's when we talk to each other on these social platforms, it can be quite toxic. But when you talk to someone face to face, it's never toxic. And so we now have that in every single city, in every state in the country, and that's our asset. That's our network. That's what someone can't come along and copy. Right? They could copy our website, they could copy everything, but they cannot copy that network that we've built. It would be super, super hard. Like, good luck, coming and knocking that off. It's not like Uber and Lyft where you multi-tenant really easy between the two apps. Property marketplaces like Airbnb, it gets very difficult to multi-list. So our long-term vision for the company isn't to be a $60 billion marketplace. It's to provide a way for neighbors to connect with each other in meaningful ways and to serve each other. And people want to talk to each other, but they don't want to talk to each other. They need an excuse. And we want to provide them as a platform with excuses, starting with storage, but continuing to broaden and expand upon that to where we bring back this nuclear community that used to exist, this nuclear neighborhood, and really start to bring each other face to face together. People are trying to solve all these societal problems from a top-down perspective, and we think that's never going to work. But if we can just get neighbors to interact with each other, and again, they're not going to do it because you tell them to do it. They're only going to do it if they have an excuse to talk to their neighbor. If we can create a bunch of excuses, then that'll solve society's problems a lot faster, because you'll start to know your neighbors, you'll start to care for your neighbors. And when you care for your neighbors, like, if everyone could just care for their neighbors, we would have no problems. So that's what we're excited about. That's like the long term. That's the let's say storage is our, it's like books to Amazon, right? But that's certainly not where we're stopping.
Very cool. Yeah, when I asked that question, that's not the answer I thought I'd get. But it's a great answer, and if you ever run for office, you're going to have a lot of really good anecdotes and stories.
I hope not.
Yeah, well, if you ever. That's a great point.
Stop me if I ever say that.
All right, we have witnesses. Okay, let's open it up for questions from the audience.
Hi there. Thanks so much for sharing your story and giving a little bit of background into the horrors and delights of fundraising. Congratulations, by the way. My name is Ivana. I'm new to the area, and I'm a former founder, recently exited. And as I'm starting to start my next company, I am really interested in the anecdote you shared, which I would probably describe as only hire when it starts to hurt. As the CEO, how do you decide what roles to not give up?
What roles not to give up, meaning like, will you just explain that a little more? Like what roles?
Yeah, so you talked about the experience of, for example, shaving off HR capacity or shaving off...
which roles to keep to yourself? The short answer is I don't know, because I'm not there yet, right? I'll let you know when Neighbor's, a $60 billion company, and I've shaved off all the roles. But if I had to take a stab at it, I think more and more, and I'm certainly not to this point yet. Finance was a role I had to shave off. We brought in our first director of finance. We're currently hiring a CFO and bringing that in. So that was a role I had to shave off. Anything that has a function that it's easier to see the functions that need to be shaved off than the functions that don't. Finance needs to be its own department. HR needs to be its own department. Comms needs to be its own department. One thing that I think that you can never give up is you're ultimately the person responsible for setting the vision, the direction, and the culture of the company. A lot of that boils up, culture boils up, but it also boils down. Right? And I think founders or CEOs that lose sight of that, they start to run into problems. I've even caught myself losing sight of that from time to time because you're just so busy, you can just caught up with, I could spend my entire day just plugging away, at tasks and email and meetings, and that might be okay if I had a different role, but I need to get outside of my comfort zone, and I need to make sure I am building good relationships with people in the company and gathering that feedback that way, and that's hard to do. So if I had to describe it, I'd say the role you're never going to give up is chief communicator, right? You have to communicate. Every single time I've ever done something wrong, I've been able to boil it down to I didn't communicate well. So if I had to take a stab at it, that's what I'd say.
Howdy, George Hatch with Pattern. Thank you for your insights as it comes in. As you look at the subcategories where you play, where are you really seeing the acceleration? Has COVID changed that? Anything that you can talk about as you move forward with some of the more, with your B round, I guess, as you're looking in, or any kind of ideas where the company's headed? Yeah,
so the two, there's a few different ways you could look at it. An easy way would just be to look at, we've got this residential piece and we've got this commercial piece. I think our residential piece will always be the largest segment of our business. It's just, it's such a huge opportunity. And so the growth there is essentially unlimited. There's always more homes to add to the platform with unused space that's just sitting there totally empty. We're horribly mismatched in the United States. We have all of these people in homes where they have way too much stuff for their home, and then they live right next door to someone that's like drowning in space. In fact, if you look at the stats on space, we went from having an average of 200 square feet per person in the 1940s or 50s to now we have 600 or 700 square feet per person in the United States. The average home size went from 1,600 square feet in the 70s to 2,500 or 2,600 square feet today, which is, I mean, what those of you who are good at math, like what's that on a percentage basis? That's like a 80% increase, 70% increase, or something like that. And so on average, we have less than half a person per room in each house in the United States. But I'm sure there's some of you that are like, really, that's the average? I certainly have way more than half a person per room in my house, and that's because we're terribly mismatched. You buy what's available to you, not what's the perfect solution for you. You have to buy on an availability basis. And so what's available is smaller to a bigger family, and then it turns out that what's available is larger to a single person. That happens all the time. So the residential piece will always be the largest. With that said, as far as a growth rate, like the commercial piece has grown quite dramatically. I think we've 25x'd the commercial square footage on our platform over the last year. So that's certainly become an important, although smaller, piece of our business, and will continue to be. You have so many office buildings right now, and retail spaces, and a lot of these REITs are realizing that they need to dedicate a certain percentage of their portfolio to a stable income. Storage is really nice because it's perfectly stable. Hospitality is super volatile. Like you get these like waxing and waning occupancy rates, and the recession hits, and all of a sudden everything dries up, and you have these gyms that are like, what do we do? We're gonna die, And these larger portfolios, they're starting to realize, well, storage, no matter whether there's a recession or a boom, storage always performs well. Storage was the best performing asset class during the 2008 recession. And so we're working with a lot of these REITs. We'll take 5-10% of their portfolio and turn it into storage. And they'll have retail places, and they'll onboard retail space in 400 cities across the country onto our platform, and we'll rent out that one retail space that they could never rent out anyway and was earning them almost zero money. And then they're able to maintain a higher occupancy rate across their portfolio. And yes, they make less on a cost per square foot basis for that one space, but it's stable income that never goes away and creates kind of a safety blanket for them.
We have time for one more.
Hi, I'm Ken, and I have kind of a combo question. How do you determine pricing for all the spots all over the country that have to vary widely? And have you experimented with remote workers, and how does that work out for you?
Remote workers, like in our company, like our employees. Yeah, I'll answer both of those. So pricing, we let the user set the price. The host gets to set whatever price they want. Now, with that said, most hosts have no idea how much their garage is worth or how much to price it at. So what we've done is we've built this big database with this algorithm that when you give us all the details about your space, you tell us how big it is and where you're located and what sort of amenities does it have and what type of space it is. And we take that and we crunch it and we spit out a recommended price. And you can choose to follow a recommended price or not, but kind of the model we use is you're 90% more likely to get reserved quickly if you use our recommended price. So that works in every city across the country. We've kind of built this national database. It's based on local self-storage pricing in the area. More and more, though, as we grow, we're moving more and more to a model where the market's able to set its own price. And as we get larger, we're able to know the market price better than a self-storage facility is able to know the market price, because the self-storage facility has very limited data. So right now, somewhat, we're using self-storage facility pricing to influence our pricing, but in the future, we'll be the ones that know what the true market price is, and the self-storage facilities will kind of have to look to us. We're already seeing that in a lot of cities where we can tell that we know the going rate of certain items way better than the storage facilities do in the area. So that's kind of a networks thing as we get bigger. To your second question, we have experimented with it almost. I think everyone has, because when the pandemic hit, we moved to an optional work from home. And so we had some people working in the office all of last year, some people working from home. Once vaccines rolled out earlier this year, we moved back into the office. Though we're kind of going against the trend there a little bit. A lot of companies are rolling out a remote or a hybrid policy. We're not. We're we're fully in office. Every single employee in our company is in the office, and we have, I'd say, very different reasons for that. It seems like a lot of the conversation today is focusing on productivity. You have these people on one side that are like, being in an office is way more productive because, I was just talking to someone, a software engineer at a large tech company here, and he was complaining to me that he's like, there's two people on my, he's like, it was pretty good for the first year, but now that we're, almost, a year and a half into the pandemic, he's like, it's gotten to the point where there's two people on my team that work, and everyone else on my team checks in for meetings. So you've kind of got that camp that's like, being in an office is way more productive. And then you've got this other camp that's like, no, being at home is way more productive. When I'm at home, I get in the zone. I'm able to like be free from distractions, and we only schedule a meeting when it needs to be scheduled, and I'm way more productive at home. And then you have this group that's like, hey, we can do both, in a hybrid model. And for us, that's more a question of the caliber of people you hire, not the environment. Like, because we hire and develop the best, we believe they'd be as productive in an office as they would be in Antarctica. We've hired great people. They're productive wherever they are, regardless of their environment. So we could care less about the productivity argument. For us, it's become a question of like, do we value those face-to-face relationships? And we do. It's part of our mission as a company. We're building these communities. Just think, do you talk to someone the same on Facebook, the same as you talk to them in person? You don't. You're willing to say things on Slack when it's kind of like no consequences, you can just throw it out there, than when you're face to face with a person and it's much easier to say you're an idiot when you're not looking at the person. And that's just one reason why we value face-to-face relationships. We're really tight-knit as a company. We know each other. We know each other's families. We have a lot of fun in the office. Sometimes that may even come at the expense of productivity. We don't care because we really like being neighborly. We really like seeing each other face-to-face on a regular basis. So that's why we've chosen to become an in-office company.
I'm in the neighbor camp on that one. So
Yeah.
100%. Last question, favorite all-time New York Yankee?
Mariano Rivera, greatest closer of all time.
You went a little bit more modern? Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. Congrats on all your success. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.